I'm Ashley Sauro, born to a middle-class couple in a rural Midwestern town. My mother was beautiful and buxom, which led to me winning the genetic lottery when it came to looks. But neither she nor my father were particularly intelligent and always struggled to make ends meet for our family of 5. Mine, there are 2 younger ones, a brother and a sister. I was shy as a child, mainly because I had no self-confidence when it came to schoolwork, and was also constantly on guard because of the stories my mother told me about boys who would only dream of getting on you, in your pants, and get you pregnant, something neither I nor my family could afford, emotionally or financially. I managed to remain a virgin until my wedding night with John Tipton, although it wasn't easy because I was constantly picked on, since after graduating from high school, I graduated surprising everyone in my family. I moved to Minneapolis to get a job as a secretary. It was only because I worked as a secretary for a serious law firm that handled gender discrimination and sexual harassment cases that I was able to keep the wolves at bay. When I insisted that I worked for Winston et al., anyone with half a brain knew better than to mess with me. I met John Tipton shortly after moving to Minneapolis. He was a low-level paralegal working for another law firm in the high-rise building that housed the offices of Winston et al. The firm he worked for had a good relationship with Winston et al. In fact, they even collaborated in some cases. John was a nice guy, but he seemed to have the same inhibited sex life that I did, and he never really complained about wanting to keep my virginity until marriage. Unfortunately, his mental abilities were no better than mine. It was only in retrospect that I realized that I probably never really loved John. He was a nice guy. I felt the need to get married, also because I wanted sex, and he treated me with respect. Although I was a virgin when I got married, I bought into the "sex is the greatest thing" mantra, like most teenagers and young adults in America. This mantra seems to permeate American culture, as evidenced by the film advertisement and the media in general. I was very disappointed the first time John and I had sex. There was nothing like this in the advertising. I didn't have a real orgasm until about the 20th time we did this, and very rarely after that. I didn't know that things could actually be different, and even if I had known, I wouldn't have been able to approach John about it. Not only was my marital sex life not great, but my life in general wasn't great either. I knew I would never advance in my career. I had little ambition. I seriously doubted that John would ever get ahead either, and neither of us were good with money. We had an apartment with a rent higher than we could realistically afford, car payments that were absurd, especially since in the city, we didn't even use the car that much and seemed to constantly receive dunning letters. We'll probably spend our last $100 plus on our anniversary dinner, hoping that for one evening, we can forget about our 5,000 plus credit card debt that we're unlikely to ever be able to pay off. While I was sitting at a table in the restaurant bar drinking a soda as usual, I was accosted 3 times in the 20 minutes that John was initially late. I was alarmed that he wasn't answering my calls, which went straight to voicemail. All 3 attackers quickly became disillusioned when I flashed my tiny wedding rings and told them I worked directly for hotshot lawyer Marjorie Kent. She's as famous in our community as Gloria Allred is nationally. The 4th guy was not dissuaded. He was a large, very handsome guy in an expensive suit and carrying a briefcase that looked like it cost as much as all the furniture in our apartment. "Hello?" He smiled, sitting down without invitation. "I'm leaving town tomorrow morning after a 2-week trip, and I hope you don't mind a little chat while you wait for your husband." "How do you know that I'm waiting for my husband?" I asked. "I saw you showing your rings to 2 guys who I saw were trying to hit on you, and I was surprised that they gave in so easily." "I also told them that I worked directly for Marjorie Kent." I giggled. "Who is this?" "The hottest sexual assault lawyer in Minnesota, maybe in the entire Midwest," I retorted. "I'm glad that I'm leaving the city and won't sexually harass you there anymore." He grinned. "By the way, my nickname is Mack Jones." He smiled, holding out his hand. "How should I contact you?" As I walked into the restaurant, I saw a sign for a strip club that was probably a couple blocks away that had Kitty Cat as the headliner. So that's how I introduced myself, shaking his hand. His handshake was strong and intimate. I didn't like how it made me feel. We chatted longer than I would have liked, but he was charming and looked into my eyes, and not at my bulging chest. I continued to look at my watch. John was already over 45 minutes late, and I was starting to get a little angry. Then several things happened quickly. First, Mack said, "I don't think your husband will come. Why don't we rent a hotel room and spend the night? There will be $1,000 waiting for you." Second, I splashed the last couple of ounces of my soda in his face, and he barely flinched. Third, before I could verbally abuse Mack, my cell phone rang, the caller ID showing it was John. "Where the hell are you hanging around?" So I politely answered my husband. John slurred, "Sorry, Ash, but I have a DWI and I'm at the police station on Nicolay Avenue, and they'll keep me there all night. Can you come tomorrow morning and post bail for me?" "Shall I post bail for you?" "How?" "Our credit cards are maxed out, and I only have cash for what was supposed to be our anniversary dinner tonight, bastard. Why the hell did you get a DWI?" "Well, I lost my job today and I felt really bad." "Don't be mad, Ash. I feel terrible." I took a few deep breaths to calm myself and then said, "I'll try to get there by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning and see if I can talk you into letting you out." "Thank you, dear," he replied. "I have to go. The cop is pulling my arm." And then the line went dead. As I stared into space, temporarily forgetting that Mack was even there, let alone that he proposed to me, and I threw my drink in his face, he spoke. "Sorry, but I couldn't help but overhear your conversation, in fact, both sides of it, since I have excellent hearing. I'm also sorry that I offended you with such a low offer. Someone with your beauty and class could easily cost $5,000 for a night of fun." I stared at him blankly. Too many disturbing questions flashed through my head. Mack obviously thought I was asking for more, so he continued. "Okay, $7,500. When I was still in a trance after some time, he said, $10,000 is my last offer. You could use some money, Ash. I mean kitty cat." When he said this, I suddenly realized that I could actually use this money. Considering my grim present, and probably even grimmer future, and of course, noticing how handsome and muscular Mack was, I snapped out of my stupor. My mouth had a mind of its own as I responded, "How do I know I can trust you? You can take advantage of me and never pay. This is a reasonable problem, but it is easy to solve. I give you $10,000 in cash. We cross the street to the Four Seasons. You rent a room. I'll give you cash for that too. You check in, give the receptionist your wad of cash to put it in the safe for you, and you get the money for the next morning when you check out." "Do you have $10,000 in cash?" I asked, shocked. Mack looked around. He called the waitress, gave her $100 and said, "This is to pay our bill. We need privacy for a few minutes." She smiled when she saw the $100 bill and said, "The far table has just become vacant. You can sit there undisturbed for 5 minutes before we need to clear it." Holding my right hand in his left hand, and his expensive briefcase in his right, he led me to an isolated back table. Blocking anyone's view with his massive back, he opened a briefcase full of money. I was sure I had never had so much money in my life, let alone kept it in one place. He deliberately and calmly counted out $100 bills while I watched. He then pulled out a small cloth bag from the bottom of his briefcase, put $10,000 in it, and handed it to me. I don't know what expression was on my face at that moment, but my mind was blown. Then he handed me another $500 and said, "Use this to pay for your hotel room in advance. Now with yours. You will be given a room with your ID. Ask them to place the purse in the safe, with instructions not to give it to anyone other than you. I will wait near the elevators. You just tell me the room number, and I will follow you a few minutes after you enter the elevator." I nodded my head like an automaton. He took my left hand, while I was clutching my purse with money and my bag in my right, and led me across the street. He moved away from me as we entered the Four Seasons, and I walked up to the table as if I knew what I was doing. I was surprised that getting to my room and the receptionist picking up my purse and giving me a receipt went without a hitch. As I passed Mack, I whispered, 12:15, entered the elevator, went up, and entered the room. It wasn't until I was in the room that I began to truly understand what the hell was going on. I took a few deep breaths before I heard a knock on the door and steeled myself to get through it. $10,000 was John's and my salvation. I opened the door, and Mack walked in, smiling. I expected him to attack me immediately. Instead, with an even wider smile, he said, "Let's have a drink and chat before we shower together." "I don't drink," I stuttered. "Of course, don't you remember the soda you threw in my face?" He chuckled. He went to the refrigerator in the room, pulled out a can of soda for me and a can of beer for himself, poured them into glasses, and then we sat next to each other on the small sofa in the room. "So, tell me about yourself, kitty cat." He grinned. After 20-minute conversation in which he told me as much about himself as I told him about myself, I have no idea how much of it was true. I was almost calm. I was surprised because I was completely captivated by his smile, his laugh, his easygoing nature, and his piercing cobalt blue eyes that seemed to penetrate my soul. Once our drinks were finished, he picked us both up and hypnotized me while looking into my eyes. "I want to unwrap my gift now, and then I want you to take off my clothes." He smiled. He slowly took off my top, skirt, bra, shoes, and underwear. He spoke soothingly at the same time. His voice was so melodic that I did not panic and did not try to cover myself while he undressed me, not only with his hands, but also with his eyes. "You have an absolutely killer body, kitty cat." He smirked as I was naked, and he held me at arm's length, exploring my body from head to toe. "Now undress me." Compared to him, I was much less skilled at undressing, but he only said encouraging and flattering words when I did it. Finally, he was naked. I looked at his face, and although he was smiling, now his look had changed. Mack lifted me off his knees, lifted me off the ground like my 130 pounds were nothing, and carried me to the bathroom. Once the water was warm, he lifted me into the large shower stall. I've never showered with anyone before. My mind was practically empty, although my stomach burned as his hands roamed all over my body, sometimes with soap, often without. The next morning I woke up alone and in a sexual haze. My whole body hurt, but it was a pleasant pain. I stumbled out of bed and saw that the clock showed 9:58 a.m. I remembered that I had to go to the police station in Nicolette. I didn't make it by 10 o'clock, but I didn't care. I took a long hot shower and, coming out of it, I felt like a human again. When I was getting dressed, I saw a note. "Ash kitty cat, youn surpassed. It was the best night of my life. I hope the little package tucked into your underwear will make you believe it. Of course, I haven't told you my whole story. I am leaving the country to avoid meeting some bad people, but if that were not the case, I would try my best to steal you away from your husband. With stars in your eyes, Mack. P.S. I wouldn't deposit more than $2,000 in cash at one time." I smiled and then looked into my panties. Another $5,000 in $100 bills. I almost fainted. I checked out around 10:40, grabbed my bag of cash from the hotel safe, deposited $2,000 into our joint checking account, and another $2,000 into my personal savings account at another bank on the way to the police station, then took a taxi to Nicolette Avenue. I walked on crooked legs, and every prick of pain made me smile rather than grimace. When I arrived at the police station, all they wanted was just $500 cash bail to get John out. The thought that just yesterday this would have been impossible, but now it was just, made me chuckle to myself. John expected me to scold him, but I was completely calm, took the car keys from the duty sergeant, and drove us home. John spent the entire weekend apologizing. I spent the whole weekend reliving my sex scenes from Friday night to Saturday morning with a smile in my heart, if not on my face, and slept to recover. After that weekend, everything changed dramatically for John and me. I first hired a paralegal who had previously worked at a pro bono law firm to represent John in his DWI. She was very nice and made a deal with the prosecutor, the best deal he could have hoped for. Since he did not cause any damage, this was his first criminal arrest, and he accepted responsibility. He got away with a 6-month loss of license, a year's probation, 200 hours of community service, a $500 fine, bail, and 2 days of alcohol treatment for drivers. Second, I paid off all of our credit card debt, sold our car, and bought a less expensive, more fuel-efficient one. When the lease expired, we moved to another apartment in a quiet area where the rent was 40% less than where we lived, and I started taking courses in paralegals. Third, John's community service has been wonderful for everyone involved. I spent about half of his 200 hours with him. We mainly helped social workers who were overworked. The timing was fortuitous, so that once his 200 hours were up, the city serendipitously allocated more money for social services. And because John had impressed everyone he worked with his enthusiasm and compassion, he was offered a job. Although this was only 80% of what he was previously earning, we were in better financial shape than before he left, because our expenses had been cut by about half. Fourth, our sex life has improved, largely at my insistence and thanks to my greatly increased libido. Now I know how enjoyable sex could be. Within 3 months of the sexiest night of my life, sex with John was noticeably better than before. It was a monumental achievement. Fifth, I started working out regularly at the gym and felt physically better than ever before in my life. Judging by the looks I received at the gym and the number of times I was harassed, the male population thought that I looked clearly better than before I started working out regularly. Sixth, by the time I was 26, I was certified as a paralegal and discovered that I was not as stupid as I always thought. I discovered that I have a real aptitude for handling paperwork during legal proceedings. By the age of 28, I was the most respected paralegal at Winston et al., working closely with Marjorie Kent on many high-profile cases and earning 2.5 times what I had made as a secretary. Although my life was infinitely better than before my night with Mack, I now had sexual cravings that were never satisfied. It was completely unrealistic that I would ever again reach the sexual nirvana I experienced during my night with Mack, but I couldn't get it out of my mind. I kissed John goodbye on a Saturday morning on my first trip abroad, a business trip with Marjorie Kent and another partner from Winston et al., to Amsterdam to take testimony from an official of a large Dutch corporation with which we were in litigation. There was a lot of paperwork that needed to be organized, prepared, or reviewed, and Marjorie insisted that I be there. So I got an expedited passport, and we flew business class. The working days were tough, but we were able to finish by Friday afternoon Amsterdam time. Marjorie and the other lawyer decided they wanted to quickly return to the United States, partly because the testimony required them to prepare several motions. They realized that I would need a few more days to get all the paperwork in order, so I was told to enjoy the weekend at the luxury hotel we were staying at and then finish processing the paperwork by Tuesday or Wednesday of the following week, shipping them home in batches, and come back on Wednesday. On Friday night, I went out for dinner at a nice place as far away from the red light district as possible, grateful that everyone in the Netherlands seemed to speak almost perfect English. While I was sipping my soda while waiting for my snack, a tall, handsome man approached my table. "Hey, Ashley, can I join you?" I immediately recognized his voice, and my heart skipped several beats. "Mack?" I gasped, although his face looked different from how I remembered it. He was still handsome, but in a different way. He sat down and said, "Yes, my nickname is Mack, but I hope to tell you my real name soon." To answer an unasked question, I had cosmetic surgery to change my appearance, although it doesn't seem to be necessary anymore. But I love my new face and have no intention of changing it back. This is an almost incredible coincidence. I haven't seen or heard from you for 4 years, and now we're in the same restaurant, on the other side of the world at the same time. Mack chuckled. "It's no coincidence that Ashley Tipton was born in Sovarau." I swallowed again. "How do you know my name?" "After you passed out from sexual overload, the night I fell in love with you, I looked in your purse and learned everything I could about you from what was in it. I knew I wouldn't be able to act on it for quite some time, but I also knew that I would find you eventually. So as you can see, it's no coincidence that I'm here with you now." He smiled widely. "My appetizer arrived. Mack ordered the same thing as me for dinner, plus a Heineken. And then we chatted as if it was completely normal for two people who only knew each other for about 9 hours 4 years ago. But they shared sexual nirvana and entered into a normal conversation. After dinner, we went to my hotel room. I knew what we both wanted and we were going to get it. But first, Mack had a lot of things to tell me that he didn't want to say in a public place. We held hands and looked into each other's eyes from time to time, while he dumped a few especially important things on me. His real name at birth was Bradley Burton. He was 32 years old. He was from Charlotte, North Carolina. He was a football player at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and had a degree in business. He was married once, divorced before I met him, and had no children. He blindly helped a criminal organization in financial matters, and when he found out who they really were, he contacted the FBI. He was nearly killed twice. During one episode, he killed 2 attackers before he received protection from the FBI. He testified against a criminal organization and the big boys were convicted. Additionally, unbeknownst to anyone, he stole approximately $20,000 from a criminal organization. He had anonymously donated nearly $8,000 to charities, deposited $10,000 in Cayman Islands and other banks, and had nearly $2,000 in cash on him when we met in Minneapolis. He was supposed to go into the witness protection program, but thought he could protect himself better, especially in Europe. So with excellent fake documents in the name of McAllister Jordan, he flew from Minneapolis to Mexico, Japan and France, finally settling in Estonia. I was excited, tired, and stressed at the same time just hearing about it. Now he speaks perfect Estonian. His new name is Hendrik Sepp, and he runs a charity organization that operates throughout the Baltic states. Thanks to careful investing in high-yield securities, he has most of the $12,000 he came to Europe with, even after donating hundreds of thousands of dollars to charity. He now felt safe because all the people he had testified against were dead, and all the other members of the criminal organization were either dead or in hiding. After his story, he lifted me from the sofa, looked into my soul with his cobalt blue eyes, and announced, "In the next 2 days and 3 nights, I intend to convince you to leave your husband for me." After this statement, he began to undress me in much the same way as on that Friday night 4 years ago. The main differences between that Friday night and Saturday morning and 4 years ago were, first, I felt something more than passion from him. Yes, something deeper. At different times, my brain flashed thoughts. Could he really have fallen in love with me in just one night 4 years ago? Second, the pillow talk was humorous, stimulating, and passionate at the same time, even better than our first night. Third, when I woke up the next morning, I was engrossed in his embrace. Saturday was a fun day. We went to exciting places, saw a play, and when we went to bed, I felt real, genuine love for the first time in my life. After another fun Sunday afternoon, Hendrik hurried me to visit him in Estonia. I called Marjorie, promised to give her all the documents and my resume by 8 a.m. on Wednesday, and told her that I needed a few days off and would not be back until a week after Monday. Although she wasn't thrilled, she eventually came to terms with it. I called John and lied to him for the first time I can remember. I told him that I had to stay until next Monday on business. He seemed sad but resigned. I had a few twinges of guilt, but surprisingly not many, and whatever agony I had was washed away by my next oral orgasm from Hendrik. I promised Hendrik that I would go to Estonia on Wednesday afternoon, but I needed to finish my work on Monday and Tuesday, since my bosses were counting on me. This meant that he had to leave after intense lovemaking early on Monday morning. My trip to Estonia was uneventful. Hendrik met me at Tallinn Airport and took me to his luxurious home in the area Kadriorg in Tallinn. I was pleased to see that most of the people I interacted with spoke English, which was the most popular language other than Estonian, and almost everyone in the country was at least bilingual. Over the next few days, I saw how Hendrik lived and worked. I was extremely impressed by his compassion and empathy for the people his charity served and how respected he was. By Sunday evening, he had received a promise from me to return as soon as I could successfully complete my work on the major trial for which I had traveled to Amsterdam and organized the divorce proceedings. I ended up being in Minneapolis for 3 weeks before I was able to get out. I talked to him every day, Endrick on Zoom. At first, Marjorie didn't take my leave very well. When I explained the circumstances, she relented and wished me well, especially since the lawsuit was settled 10 days after the deposition. I was surprised at how amicable my breakup with John was. It helped that he was now in a good place with a job much more suitable for him than his job as a paralegal, and I didn't ask for any money, just my personal belongings. He really surprised me when, shortly after I told him, with all the sympathy I could muster, that I was divorcing him. He asked, "Who is Mack?" "What?" was my stellar answer. "Several times in a fit of passion you called me Mack. Who is he?" I swallowed hard, lowered my eyes for a few seconds, and then looked into his eyes. He deserved to know the truth. "This is the guy in Estonia for whom I'm breaking up with you." Tears welled up in his eyes, but he said nothing more. I was very excited about my flight to Estonia with the first-class ticket that Endrick bought for me. I tried to suppress my expectations because I couldn't really believe that my life would be fantastic, the way I dreamed of. Endrick and I got married 2 weeks after my divorce was final. Endrick brought my whole family to Estonia for this. Now, 10 years after I fled to Estonia, after our third child, my life is not just good, it is fantastic. Hendrick's only complaint about me is that it's my fault that we have sex all the time. My only real beef with him is that it's his fault that we have sex all the time. I go through life with a huge smile on my face. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.